Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. My name is Mark Richards, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We welcome all of you. Guests are invited to come early on another Sunday and drop into the Inquirer session at 10:10 a.m. in the parlor, where you can learn more about Unitarian Universalism and our church in a small casual gathering. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card located in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. You can also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary, where you will also find hearing assist devices and Braille hymnals. Additionally, a fragrance-free area is located in the first pews on the right side of the sanctuary. If you're a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you'll be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name is Mark Richards, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. I'm the tallest guy in the room. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to volunteers are needed to help cook and serve a meal for Cathedral Center on Saturday, March 2nd, from 6:30 to 8 p.m. Sign up at the social justice table or email Andy Cinco. And we need to hear your voices as we search for our new Director of Religious Education, so swing by the RE table in there to find out how you can contribute. Please find details on these and more events in the announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. And when you forget to find somebody to light the chalice, you're suddenly put on the spot in the middle of the service. So I will be lighting the chalice today.
That's a wonderful solution. Our opening words this morning are from "To Bless the Space Between Us" by John O'Donohue. When we love, we leave our separate solitudes and come toward union where we complement each other. It is this ancient desire to discover and come home to the heart's lost other half that awakens its capacity for love and belonging. There are certain things that can only happen in solitude, and every life needs a rhythm of solitude in order to experience those things. But the experience of self-discovery, psychological integration, and spiritual growth can happen to us only when our desire draws us out of our shells and towards the precarious and life-giving sanctuary of another human heart. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us in our opening hymn, number 114, Forward Through the Ages.
Good morning. In 1966, when I was 4, we Hayes settled in Cedarburg. I was a handful, and my brother John was arriving, so Mom and Dad inquired about kindergarten for me, but the public school wouldn't allow a September baby. So instead, I was enrolled at Emmanuel Lutheran and promptly assigned a big golden Bible and a hymnal to memorize. This is the story of how 3 generations of Hayeses found First Church. That wasn't the story. This is the story. During my 2nd grade, we adopted a giant fluffy orange cat from the Humane Society. He was regal and needed a proper name. So I pulled out my hymnal and I proposed the name Harold. I had been inspired by the line, "Herald forth the King," only for context, the complete phrase is, "The star shines to herald forth the King." That would be herald, H-E-R-A-L-D, the verb, as in to announce or to acclaim, in this case, the arrival of Jesus. I thought the star shines to herald forth the King. Let me say that again. I thought the star was shining on Harold, the 4th King. But also during 2nd grade, I came home from school and sat down for dinner and asked my parents, "Did you know that I have sin in my blood?" Within a week, a church search was on. Friends suggested this place, and soon we began to commute. So for my parents, this church would help with the hard work of raising children in insane times. Vietnam, assassinations, race riots, the arms race. Fast forward, Angela and I found the same safe and sane harbor when our daughters Kate and Elizabeth arrived. How we get through childhood is largely answered by the decisions of connected adults, who with hindsight to risk and opportunity, fashion an environment in which a child finds tools to live and to love and hopefully to survive to start anew. This church fuels that continuum for the Hayeses. Joined with you, we have enjoyed food, art, literature, and architecture. We have marched, cried, laughed, and celebrated. We have said hello to babies and to boyfriends and goodbye to friends and dear family. We have combined forces, poured concrete, swung hammers, built houses, friendships, and confidence. We have pondered the cosmos, cited science, played bingo, read books, changed diapers. We have debated and collaborated and have sung and heard hours and hours of glorious music. Incidentally, did you know that we have music in our blood? But most importantly, we have learned about our whole lives. A few weeks ago, we recognized neighbors attending a church service with their 8-year-old. They are in the midst of creating that environment and seeking the right church fit. As the conversation developed, I asked if they knew about OWL, O-W-L, or Our Whole Lives. They did not. So I did my awkward dad best to describe the program. Sex ed, identity ed, wellness ed, empathy ed. Yes, but it is so much more. With a lifetime immersed in the ideas of this church, I've come to see that OWL is when we Unitarian Universalists are at our very best. It is our boldest, most spiritually differentiated, and deliberately empathetic work, and is a powerful magnet to and manifestation of our faith. Just when childhood naivety is colliding with discovery, and when parenting can be the hardest, when the cynical might exploit dark fears and the fearful might hide their eyes, we lock arms with the family as its family and shine a bright light on self-care, self-determination, the trappings and treasures of trust, the authority of consent, and the glory in relationship. And then we walk together into whole lives. The Hayes can't thank you enough. So when weighing your pledge, please consider that this light shines to herald forth our children.
Today is the opening Sunday of this year's pledge drive, which we begin every year with a covenant between the congregation and our visiting stewards and pledge team, affirming their call to lead us forward as a community of generosity and abundance. So now will the members of the pledge team and our visiting stewards this year please come up and join me on the chancel. These pledge team members and visiting stewards will lead our generosity work during our pledge drive, so you may be contacted by someone that is up here about First Church and your part in its stewardship. Please return their calls. They're all lovely people. I promise you, none of them is scary. Our pledge team chair is Fred Gutierrez here, our tireless and fantastic leader. And he's going to lead the pledge team visiting steward response in the covenant that we're about to make with one another. So congregation, will you please rise in body or spirit and read the congregation part of this covenant? This congregation exists to change lives, to nurture spirits, engage minds, and inspire action in our members and our community.
Stewardship exists to fulfill that mission.
As members of a free and democratic church, we know the loving stewardship of our congregation belongs to all of us.
The Stewardship Council and Pledge Team are pieces of the community acting on behalf of the whole.
We trust you to lead us in lives of stewardship on a journey of gratitude, commitment, and celebration of our community and values.
We are humbled by your trust and take up this task on behalf of us all.
We move forward together in service and commitment, giving of ourselves to build our beautiful future. Folks, will you give our pledge team and visiting stewards a hand? So Nick just shared a beautiful story about how this church has been part of his family's life for 3 generations, and how OWL has been transformative in the way that we serve our families here in this church and in the world. But each of you has your own story about how this church has been transformative in your life, about why it matters to you and why we need one another. So the pledge team would like to begin the pledge drive this year by asking you to reflect on the question, why do we need one another? Why do we need one another? I'm going to tell you something, and I'm going to trust that you'll keep listening to me as you receive the instructions. At the ends of your pews, you will find envelopes. And on the front of those envelopes is a hand. And on the inside of those envelopes are construction paper and markers. So if you're at the end of the pew, go ahead and pick that envelope up, take out a piece of the construction paper, and then pass the envelope down the aisle so everyone gets to see the example on the front and choose their own construction paper and marker. Because you all have a hand in making this place what it is, our pledge team wants to ask you to take that piece of paper and trace an outline of your hand on it. And then in the center of the paper, in the center of the hand, answer the question, why do we need one another? So once you trace your hand, in the center, your response here, you're going to answer the question in a word or a phrase. Why do we need one another? If you need more paper, go ahead and raise your hand and an usher will come to you with more construction paper. And we're going to just have a moment to trace our hands and answer the question, why do we need one another, in the center of it? And then the ushers will come pick up those pieces of paper. I'm delighted to be able to share with you the news that our members Amanda and Tony Pansiera have welcomed a new baby into their family this week. Zoe Marianne Pansiera was born on Friday, February 15th at 9:26 a.m., weighing 9 pounds and 7 ounces. Mom, Dad, and little Zoe are all happy and doing well. As is our custom in this congregation, whenever we have a birth, an adoption, or a death among our members, we light our candle of life. Today, in honor of Zoe Marianne Pansiera. Will you join me now in a time of contemplation, followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life? Take a moment just to ground your feet and your sit bones. Feel the top of your head connecting you. And your breath moving in and out, bringing you into being here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Be with us as we ride the joys and the sorrows of our community. May we celebrate the victories and grieve the losses together. May we know covenant, know that we are one another's people, entrusted to one another's care. We need one another, and we are stronger together. May we be held in this community of trust. May it be so.
A couple of years ago, I was finally confronted with the fact that I had a real problem trusting people and accepting the generosity of others. I spent the last 20 years serving in the Army, a profession that espouses rugged individualism. Suck it up, drive on, you can sleep when you're dead. Those are phrases I heard often and were said myself. There's also a lot of risk within the profession, flying helicopters, jumping out of airplanes, deploying to combat. It led me to question what others are doing and heightened my sensitivity for things that could go wrong, resulting in a high threshold of trust. In 2016, I came face to face with these realities. After months of fighting off what I thought was a really bad cough and fatigue from work, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. My reluctance to trust others was validated right from the start. I met with the oncologist on a Monday, had my biopsy on Wednesday, and got the phone call with results on Friday. In that phone call, they gave me an inconclusive diagnosis. And when I asked if I had cancer, the person said, "Not exactly." And then followed up 2 hours later and told me that I definitely had cancer. I spent weeks making sure they were right after that first fumble. A few weeks later, I started treatment, and the generosity started pouring in, both from people I knew and from people I didn't know. People were bringing dinners over. Cards, texts, and phone calls of love and support were daily occurrences. I heard from people I hadn't talked to in years. Playdates for our kids showed up on the calendar. Projects at work were being taken off my plate. I couldn't handle how much help I had to accept. That fact that I wasn't able to suck it up and drive on felt like I was weak for not being able to persevere. And while the physical effects of cancer and chemotherapy were hard, the emotional toll of skepticism of medical teams and acceptance of unconditional generosity were nearly as difficult. It was my wife, Sarah, who wiped clean my lens of distrust and individualism. She asked me if one of your soldiers was in this situation, would we bring them dinner and help out with their kids? Of course we would. Would you expect anything in return from them? No, it's great to be able to help people out in a time of need. And if they were skeptical of what was going on around them, well, I'd tell them to worry about what they can control and take comfort in the community that has their back. After that, things looked and felt a little different. I realized that my nurses always greeted us with a smile and patience, even after seeing dozens of people that day for treatment. I was more relaxed going in for chemo because I knew they were good at what they did, and I'd taken a significant amount of anti-anxiety medication. I kept thinking about what would I do if it were one of my soldiers. So when someone from the Pastoral Care Associate team called to offer support, I appreciated their calming presence. When friends from church offered to take care of our kids, we took advantage of the opportunity to have a date night. When kids from the mission trip who were in college now called or texted, I relished in the opportunity to hear about their lives and how they were doing. When I needed a ride home from treatment, I didn't feel guilty for calling a friend from church. Members of church with whom I worked with always checked in with me and reminded me to focus on my health and that the company will take care of the rest. A friend of mine called me up once I was in remission and asked me a powerful question and said, "What did you learn from this?" And I took a bit of time and reflected, but I learned that the dynamic between giving and receiving is complicated. Be okay with receiving the generosity of others and give to others when you can. While my issues with trust are not completely resolved, I will be better served by assuming positive intent of others. And finally, each night when my head hits the pillow, I'm ever grateful for my health, the wealth of opportunity and community, and the love of friends and family. Thank you.
In 1938, a group of scientists at Harvard began a longitudinal study of human health and well-being. They recruited 268 sophomores and tracked their physical and mental health and their emotional well-being over nearly 80 years. Over the decades, they expanded the group to include the original subjects' children and wives, as well as residents of Boston's inner city. They tracked data on all of these subjects' mental and physical health, as well as things like their income and their achievements, their marriages and their community relationships. And they used that 80 years of comprehensive data from several thousand people to answer the question, what makes for the happiest, healthiest human life? Any guesses? If you were here at the first service, you can answer. All right, relationships. But the surprise was that it wasn't having a marriage or the number of friendships that a person had, but the quality of those relationships. It was the level of trust in those relationships and the ability to go deep and be one's true and authentic self. Turns out that having trust in people that you can rely on helps your nervous system relax, it helps your brain stay healthy for longer, and it reduces emotional pain. In contrast, people who feel lonely are more likely to have their health decline, and they're more likely to die younger. So being able to find a community of trust, to find relationships of trust that you can rely on, be your authentic self with, and go to the depths of meaning with actually expands your life expectancy, as well as makes you happier. Martin Winecki of the Tamara Peace and Research Education Center in Portugal writes in his book, Unlearning Together, that we are community beings by our nature, that we in community get grounded in the interconnected web of all existence. Sadly, the isolation and competition endemic in Western culture trains that instinct out of us in ways that harm our health and our well-being. Isolation causes stress on our psyches and on our bodies, and practicing community is medicine for that harm. Winecki wrote, "Trust is a crucial factor in creating transformative communities, as trust is a primordial healing power which reconnects us to ourselves, to each other, and to the world." To develop trust, we need ways of living together in which we can dare to drop our masks and freely express what we genuinely feel and think and love. When truth is allowed, trust emerges. We practice community here at First Church by building relationships of trust. We do this in our theme circles and in our circle suppers, in our pastoral care relationships, our programs for our children and youth, our social connections and support, and when we worship together as a full body. We have some folks who have shared with us why they think that this community matters, and I'm just going to grab a few and read them to you. We need one another to lift each other up from the depths of loneliness into strength and community. We need one another to make a more equitable world. We need one another to comfort us when we need support. And we need one another to not be lonely. Studies have shown that when we gather together in community and move our bodies in common rhythm and purpose, it heals trauma and rebuilds our trust in the world. By gathering together in a body of worship and singing hymns, our bodies learn that this is a safe place. They learn to trust again and to heal the places that trust has been broken. In community, we learn that we are part of one another. In our small groups and our classes, we create that kind of life-lengthening happiness through the depths of relationship that are created when we explore meaning together and deeply listen to one another. Our children and our youth learn things here and have conversations here that they don't have anywhere else. Our people learn that this community can be relied on for caring for one another in times of trouble and sorrow. Our pastoral care associates who are trained as listening presences show up in times of trouble. They go to your homes and to hospitals to be with people when life gets hard. And when one of our people is dying, your ministers go, bringing your love with us, and stand with our people in that place between life and death. This kind of community of trust strengthens us and emboldens us in our individual lives and in the world. Having a community that you can rely on literally lengthens your life and makes you happier. But as a community of trust, we also know that we're stronger and more courageous together in the world. In October of 2018, another congregation that had built a community of trust demonstrated the kind of difference that the strength of community can make. As you probably remember, on October 27th of 2018, during Shabbat morning services at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, a white nationalist entered the sanctuary and began shooting, killing 11 members of the congregation and wounding 7 more in the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in our country's history. The next day, they called M. Dove Kent, a former director of Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, and invited Kent to come work with Ben the Ark Pittsburgh, which is a progressive Jewish organization, to respond to the violence. Together with M. Dove Kent and Ben the Ark, Tree of Life Synagogue simultaneously worked to care for their people and help them mourn, and to respond to the attack in Pittsburgh, leading the community, as well as step into the national conversation by preparing a powerful action that rebuked the white nationalist undertones of President Trump when he traveled to visit the scene of the crime. That congregation was in crisis. They were in incredible mourning and personal and collective trauma. They had lost friends and family. They were dealing with flashbacks of the violence and their escape from it. They were dealing with having those old chords of historical anti-Semitic trauma strummed by this act of hate when their holy place, their sanctuary of comfort and trust, had been violated in the most horrific way. And in all of that, their trust for one another, their strength in community emboldened them not just to comfort each other in the grief, but to lead forward out of hate. M. Dove Kent wrote the following about her experience of working with that congregation. Immediately, she said, immediately, they had the resolve to write a letter to Trump that set fire, changed the national conversation, and unmasked Trump for the white nationalist that he is. For this public bravery and resolve, we all know there are risks. There is every reason in the world for them to have gone silent and retreated, and yet they were completely committed to planning an action, a ritual to heal their community's grief and to use whatever energy they had left, and the critical moment that they knew that they were in, to strike a blow against the violent white nationalist movement that had killed 11 of their beloved neighbors and friends. What this commitment looked like concretely was that one of the leaders from the synagogue led the action, wearing the outfit that she was wearing the morning of the massacre as she had been preparing to go to synagogue and then changed out of when she got a call from a friend saying, "Don't go to the shul. There's a live shooter there." The strength of community, of relationships of trust, emboldened that congregation with shaking hands and hearts of purpose to do what needed to be done. They not only cared for one another in grief, they also led 5,000 people in a rebuke of white nationalism and of Trump. They had the mayor of Pittsburgh and a slew of elected officials joining them to say that Trump was not welcome in Pittsburgh. They caused him to change his plans early and end his visit with no public statements, in effect, kicking him out of town. Through the strength of their relationships with one another and their commitment to love, they changed the story and made things possible that had seemed impossible. This is the power of relationships of trust, of communities of trust. They create strength and courage beyond imaginable bounds, giving the capacity to lead even in horror. We need as many of these communities of trust as possible in this moment. And we too, here in this congregation, create that kind of strength and courage when we walk with our people. We walk with them into the pain of hospital walls and chemotherapy treatments and the loss of hospice beds. We journey into the grief of divorce and with the trauma of addiction and through the loss of loved ones. We hold one another's hands in the despair of a world shuddering with hate and facing the devastation of climate change. We are a community of trust, holding one another in a world that desperately needs to be held. We pull people out of isolation and plug them into connection. This matters. This matters to the people in this room who have received it, but it also matters in the Milwaukee community, and it matters in the world. This is what your stewardship of this community creates. This is what your pledge enables. It's not just one more cause that you give to. It's your stewardship. This is your place, your community, your people, the place there where we practice together. You are the stewards of this congregation, and we all are entrusted to your care. Your pledge team has asked you to participate in the stewardship of this congregation with a bold step into our future by increasing your pledge this year. Because of the very normal loss of pledge income that came during the senior minister transition beginning with Drew's retirement 5 years ago, we have a $107,000 gap between our operating income and our operating expenses. Now, blessedly, we received an incredibly generous bequest from our beloved Lou Krug 2 years ago, and that's helping us bridge the gap right now. But it's not enough to cover that gap year after year. We need to close the gap with our pledges in order to fulfill our mission and continue staffing our programs and serving our people. In a congregation of this size, staff runs our programs, which is necessary in order to serve 750 members without burning out all of you. Your pledge, therefore, goes to fund programs like Our Whole Lives that Nick told you about, programs like our Pastoral Care Associates that Mark told you about, our music program demonstrated today by our gorgeous and amazing choir, and our worship services, which we hold every Sunday, 52 weeks a year for all members and friends and guests and visitors who need the stability and sustenance of worship. Now, Fred has told me, and I trust his math on this, that if every pledging member increased their pledge by $22 per month, we'll close the gap this year. $22. I decided I can do $22 a month. I priced it out. It's about 1 latte per week, or 1 takeout dinner, or half the price of getting my nails done. So I can do this. I can answer the pledge team's call to increase my own pledge by $22 a month. But I know that not everyone is going to be able to do $22 a month, and that's okay. So what I've decided to do is that I'm actually going to do it for someone else as well. So I'm going to do 2 $22 per month so that I can cover someone who might not be able to make that increase. I hope that you'll join me in committing to be one of the pledge units that close the gap this year. And maybe, if you can, you might decide that you want to close the gap for another member, or maybe, hey, even a couple of other members. And I want to ask one more thing of you, since the weather decided to give us a little extra community challenge this morning. I'd like to invite you to have a conversation with one of our members who wasn't able to make it to church this morning. We are all the stewards of this congregation, and it is entrusted to all of our care. So, in addition to answering the phone calls from our official visiting stewards, I'd like to invite you to intentionally have one conversation with another member that's not in this room about your commitment to close the gap this year. We create a community of trust together through both giving and receiving, through that dance. We give financially, and we give our presence to our people when we show up. We give our expertise as leaders and our time to help run the programs of the church. And we also receive the strength and the support of the community. We receive the steadiness of worship every week, the inspiration of the music and the transformation of our people's stories that they share with us. We receive a community of care, people who show up when we are sick, when we are hurting. And we receive the courage that comes from having real relationships of deep trust. At the end of the lunch during which the members of the Tree of Life Synagogue planned that action, one of the leaders of the synagogue said, "I am so glad to be having lunch with you all today. I was supposed to have lunch today with my beloved friend who was murdered. If I'm going to be anywhere today eating lunch, I am so grateful that it's here with you." I am so grateful to be in this congregation of trust with you all. You make me stronger. You raise me up. You give me the courage to do what needs to be done. Thank you. Thank you for being part of stewarding this community of trust. Amen.
Every week we have an opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all non-pledge cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. So today we share the plate with Feast of Crispin, an organization bringing actors and veterans together to teach and strengthen emotional resources for veterans. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now gratefully be received.
please rise in body or spirit and join us in the responsive reading printed in your orders of service. This is We Need One Another by George Odell, and I'll begin. We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted.
We need one another when we are in trouble and afraid.
We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again.
We need one another when we accomplish some great purpose and cannot do it alone.
We need one another in the hour of success, when we are looking for someone to share in our triumphs.
We need one another in the hour of defeat, when the encouragement might endure and stand again.
We need one another when we have come to die, and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey.
All our lives we are in need, and others are in need of us.
Will you join in singing hymn number 318, We Would Be One?